It's an honor to follow one grandson of a coal miner who had black lung with another grandson of a coal miner who had black lung, my grandfather. And you've consumed a lot of meat here. I am the politician who's going to give you some empty calories to top off your meal, and discuss a little bit about just this, what ails the working class in America. Now, I came here, probably the first time I came to Heritage was back in 1990, 35 years ago, 34 years ago. We'd have never seen that photo up here, that topic up here. That was just not something that conservatives ever really thought about because they weren't our voters. Republicans, I remember I got elected to the United States Senate in Pennsylvania by losing the city of Philadelphia by a bunch, losing Pittsburgh by a bunch, losing the blue-collar areas of southwestern Pennsylvania, I mean, badly, labor-oriented blue-collar areas of the Northeast and the Southeast. And I won the suburban communities, the wealthy suburban communities where the Republican rich suburbs were. All of those Republican rich suburbs today are voting 60 to 70% Democrat. And all those areas that I used to lose were heavy blue collar, they are all voting 70 to 80% Republican. The Republican Party has changed, and Orrin Cass and Mitt Romney didn't realize that back in 2012. And the reality was that it has been changing over time. I wrote a book, first book I wrote was called It Takes a Family, and I talked about how the destruction of the American family and the culture changes that were going on in America were shifting the geopolitics of America. We were starting to see, because of the elite cultural changes that were going on in America, that and what was happening in our colleges and universities and our educational institutions, that they were changing the face of America, and they were changing the realignment of the parties. I remember during that campaign in 2012, there was an event at the night of the convention, which I spoke. And it was focused on, you may remember Barack Obama said to small business people, you didn't build that, right? That the government had a role in helping to build your business. And so Romney dedicated an entire night of the convention trotting out small business person after small business person. I mean, different colors, different areas of the country. I mean, it was very, very diverse, but one small business person after another out there in the front. And I was the speaker later in the evening. So I got to meet all these people, and it just struck me that, I don't know if you know, but what percentage of America are small business owners? Like 5%, right? Not one of those people walked out there that night with a worker that worked with them. There wasn't a single worker on that stage that night. And the reality is 74% of Americans ages 25 to 65 don't have a college degree. Over 75 are workers, not owners. And by the way, they're now our voters. But we have not been a party, we have not been a movement that has really been talking to them or has tried to put our intellectual heft behind how we're going to make life for those people better. And so one of the things I jumped at the opportunity when Chris called me to do this was just to say thank you. Thank all of you for the work that you're doing. Thank Heritage for caring enough about this, because the conservative movement will die unless we feed the people who want to help us. You see, if we don't have policies and we don't have a vision, and if we don't start doing things that address this issue of the middle of America, that is now our voter, wants to be our voter. It's not completely our voter, and the biggest reason they're not completely our voter is not because of the dynamic of the issues. A lot of it has to do with people of color who fit that description are not our voters because of other impediments that have developed over time, where we haven't been able to get our message out to those voters, in part because we're sort of new at the party, in my opinion, in talking to working men and women of America. We have always been the party of cut taxes, cut government, everything else will be fine. Cut regulation, everything else will be fine. That doesn't necessarily appeal to people who are struggling out there and as has been described by the gentleman who talked before, of what's going on in America. It is, in many respects, the right answer. And by the way, I'm not saying that those aren't the right things to do, that cutting government and cutting taxes aren't the right thing. They are. Cutting regulation, cutting credentialism, all the things are talked about. But we have to do a better job at packaging that to the community that is our voter and wants to vote for us, and those who have not voted for us, but actually should, based upon the policy prescriptions that are going to benefit them in their lives. And so, to me, this is an opportunity that is before us now to come up with solutions and talk specifically about this and make it more of an emphasis. Understand who is buttering your bread. And if like I said, if the conservative movement doesn't grasp that and take it on, back in 2014, I wrote the book that Chris referred to called Blue Collar Conservatives. And I did it because of what I'm talking about here. I recognized the change that was going on. I don't know, you probably saw that Ron DeSantis spent like $100 million in Iowa and didn't win the Iowa caucuses. I spent $23,000 on television, and my campaign spent a total of less than $1 million, and I won the Iowa caucuses. How did that happen? Because I went out and talked to blue-collar people all over Iowa. That's what I did. And I talked about energy and manufacturing and immigration and all the things that you'd think that no Republican was really talking that much about. I was talking about families. You see, one of the missing pieces of what we're talking about, I'm a big fan of what they're doing in Hungary. Am I a fan of all the specifics of what they're doing in Hungary with respect to family policy? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you can make arguments about them. But you know what they're doing? They're talking about it. They're actually trying to do something. It's a priority. A lot of the things that is being talked about here is not necessarily you have to pass something, but you have to talk about it. You have to jawbone it. You have to talk about it enough that people actually think you're serious about doing something. So it's not, you always hear this about, politicians get told this all the time. People don't care what you think until people don't care what you think until they know that you care, right? And so part of the effort here, and that's why, again, I applaud you for this, is we have to make this more of a center of what we're talking about. I went around and I had solutions. Yeah, I had ideas. I had plenty of ideas of how we could help families and how we could help, because the family problem is a huge reason for the decline in middle America. What we've done to young boys, what we've done with women in the workplace and the dynamic that's all around. We need to begin to address those issues. And we have to just talk about them. And again, some of the solutions are not passing legislation, but just promoting certain values and ideas. And so that's what I did. And I was able to not only win Iowa, but go ahead and win a bunch of states. And I was outspent 4, 5, 6 to 1. And so I thought, well, I knew I had something here, so I wrote this book. And believe it or not, I got a call. I was doing a radio show in New York, and I got a call that someone wanted to talk to me because they heard me on the radio talking about this book. And they asked me to come by and see him. I said, okay, fine. So I came by and I walked in to his office, and he's sitting behind his desk in his office, and he's holding a copy of my book. And he said, I read your book. I said, yeah, you probably didn't read my book. And he said, no, I read your book. Great book. You know who that is? Yeah, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, in the summer of 2014, we had an hour conversation talking about my book. And talking about someone needs to run, this is what he said, someone needs to run for president on this book. Because this is the problem in America. Working men and women are getting the short end of the stick. Now, I always maintain that Trump is like Moses. Trump was able to do something I couldn't do with the Republicans. I went to RNC meetings. I went all over the place trying to plead with people to begin to address these issues, understand who our party is, understand what our future is, and start dealing with these issues. No one would pay attention. So Trump was like Moses. He got us out of bondage. He got us out of the old establishment corporatist ideal that was the Republican Party that was stuck in the past and was looking to pursue voters who don't want to vote for us anymore. The problem is with Trump is that to get to the promised land, we need a Joshua, not a Moses, because Moses never got us there. Now, we may get Moses again here in the next few months. But ultimately, if we're going to reach people that we need to really build a dominant majority movement in this country, we're going to need someone who actually doesn't break a lot of glass to get their message across. And so part of that, and my closing comment is, part of this waiting for this Joshua, or Joshuas, hopefully many of them, to come along is going to take not just someone who can communicate directly with people and do it effectively, but it needs some intellectual support. It needs some substantive ideas. There was a lot of a description of the problem, not a lot of ideas on how to solve the problem today. But that's why I wanted to come here and just plead with you that if we are going to be a conservative movement in the future, we have to understand that we have to address this issue, these voters, because they are the vast majority of America. I mean, it's so exciting because as a conservative Republican starting out in this, it was always a struggle to figure, how do we cobble together enough people to win elections? Here, it's how do we convince enough people who agree with us to vote for us? We got a huge majority. Now we just have to figure out how to convince them that we actually are on their side. What a wonderful opportunity you have. I mean, it's a smorgasbord out there. Please help us deliver that. Thank you.
Senator.
In picking up on that, there was a county in Pennsylvania that I never got more than 35% of the vote that now votes consistently 70% Republican. And the reason is simply this. The Democrats say that they're deplorable people. Now, I don't know how long they're going to be that stupid, that they deliberately go out and demean big swaths of the American public. And they rob them of the opportunity to make a living because of their energy policies and manufacturing and all these other policies that destroy decent blue-collar jobs. But let's just be clear, and I said it here, but I want to reemphasize. A lot of these folks are with us because the other side has simply abandoned them and have demeaned them. We have to have something that is going to make them sticky and support us as opposed to just hating the other side. And to me, it comes down to all the economic stuff that we've talked about here is absolutely critical, absolutely important for us to create more opportunity. And but I have to come back to families and the fact that our birth rate is 1.6 per family. I mean, we're dying. We're dying, and that just tells you how hopeless people are. I mean, to me, children is a sign of hope and that you believe in the future. And so we have a whole bunch of people who have record levels of depression, record levels of abuse, record levels of addiction, of whether it's pornography, which is a scourge on men, to screens, to you name it. And And I know it's hard to say, well, how do we legislate around those things? I get it. It's hard. But That's why I'm here, because there are a lot of smart people here who can think about what we can do to help create more marriageable men. I wish I had a nickel for every young woman I know who's just amazing, in their 20s and 30s, and they can't find a marriageable man. And it's pathetic. It's awful. We're just destroying our own culture, and we don't talk about it. We as conservatives don't talk about it. We don't put forth ideas. We don't jawbone about it. We just sort of accepted it. Well, it's sort of beyond, the scope of government. Well, maybe beyond the scope of public policy, but it's not beyond the scope of leaders of our country. And sometimes one of the things the other side does much better than we do is they're willing to promote their ideas, even if they don't have a solution necessarily that works. It's always spend more money, but they're not shy about speaking out about what they think is the right thing for right direction of the country when it comes to the culture. And we do. We don't run our campaigns on it. We're afraid to. You take abortion. Name me a Republican who makes abortion the central theme of their campaign. None. Zero. Name me a Democrat. 90% of them. Why? Because we're just cultural cowards. We just got to stop it. We lose if we don't say what we believe in. We lose if the other side carries the narrative. Just stop it. It's like giving money to Dartmouth. Stop it. Don't do that anymore. Don't do things that we know are going to come back and bite. Just stop it and start doing things that show that you care about what's going on in this country.
Rick, thank you very much. I want to ask these gentlemen one question, and then we'll turn to the audience. As I listen to your presentations and what you just said, I'm impressed that you home in on things that are relatively beyond government policy levers. And what I draw for this is that we should get Rick to run for president again. That is, we've had presidents who, whether you like or dislike their policies, were able to convey a sense of agency and empathy connected with the people, with average people. I think Franklin D. Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan are the two most recent ones, who gave people a sense of a degree of national community and caring about each other, and were highly successful as politicians, and probably a good deal of their success as policy leaders came from that too. So we can hope for that. In the meantime, I think that everybody, all the four of you, probably agree on many issues. For example, when Rick was talking about his campaigning in Iowa, talking about average people, they wanted to talk about energy, inflation, immigration, and families. They probably want to talk about the same things today, probably on energy policy, inflation, immigration, and families. There's a lot of agreement here, but there must be some things that where there's disagreement, where there are issues in coming up with a politics appealing to the working class. One thing that at least I heard everybody mention it, but I think Nick and Ian especially, were the problems of welfare dependency and the expansion of income support, mean-tested benefits of one kind or another. I'll bet that nobody was complaining to Rick when he was campaigning for president about the welfare state and wanting to cut back on benefits. And it actually seems to be something that Democrats and Republicans agree on, is that we're not going to touch the welfare state. So that seems to me to be a pretty big problem facing the construction of the political coalition the senator hopes for.
Back in 1996, I was one of the authors of welfare reform and talked about it throughout my political career. And the idea that we are giving any kind of welfare benefits to able-bodied single men or women is ridiculous. Is just and yes, I think we can talk about that, and I think we should talk about that. I think we need to support families and we need to support children, and we can talk about how we do that. But it's not that the question is how we do it, not whether we do it. But the idea that we have, as a party, have accepted welfare to single men and women, I don't accept it, and I don't think it's something that we should accept. There is the idea that of responsibility and self-sufficiency and bootstrapping and all those things. And if you're a single man or a single woman, you should be held to those to that challenge. Your question about the Black community, and it's one of the most difficult things I've tried to grapple with. As a senator, I can't even tell you, I spent more time in the Black communities in Pennsylvania than I did anywhere else. I hardly ever went to the suburbs, and I just got crushed every time. Didn't matter. And so there is that sense among Republican politicians that it doesn't matter, that no matter what you do, you're not going to change. They're not going to change their votes because 90+% of blacks vote for Democrats. And it's been pretty consistent in spite of what would appear to be reasons not to. For example, educational choice. I mean, it's so obvious that community is very much in favor of it, and the Democrats are and yet they go to the polls and they vote for the other side. So there's that. But I think your point is that community used to be heavily Republican. Now it is heavily Democrat. I think there is an opportunity, and plus, it's just, you talk about the need. I mean, this is a community that is underperforming vis-a-vis the rest of America. That's just true. And so I think we have an obligation to take the message we have and maybe you can talk about education, talk about the felony issue, talk about issues that more disproportionately affect the Black community. And I give Donald Trump credit for this. He's not afraid to talk about it. And again, I come back to the cowardice that is the conservative movement. No offense, but it is. We love talking about economics. We love talking about things that are really safe to talk about, but we don't want to be scolded by the media for talking about things that are really controversial. And because you don't want to be called a bigot, you don't want to be called a racist, you don't want to be called a homophobe, you don't want to be called a transphobe, so we don't. So we just stay away from them. And they bully us. And the reason I think the reason we haven't done as well in the Black community is because sometimes we're just afraid that if we do that, we may say something that's going to get us in trouble and we'll be called a bigot or we'll be called a racist. That's just the reality. I'm just telling you, as a politician, those are the things you think about. What's the cost benefit for me going there? Because the benefit doesn't look very high if 90% of folks are going to vote for them no matter what happens. And the cost could be really high because they could come after me for saying something that maybe I shouldn't have said. Now, I know that sounds really stupid, but it isn't. It's real. And so, again, we have to care enough that we don't care what the consequences are. We have to care enough about actually fixing and at least addressing and working with people who are hurting in this country without worried about what Joe Scarborough is going to say the next day and trying to make fun of you. As someone who has been made fun of prior to Donald Trump, probably more than anybody else, you know what? It isn't bad. It's not. You'll survive. I'm here. It's okay. You'll get through this, and it's worth doing.
Orrin, Nick, Ian, Rick, you are, among other things, great teachers. Thank you very much for being with us here at Heritage this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, the session is adjourned. Thank you.